July 6, 2011, the Gulf of Aden. On this night, a massive oil tanker, the Brillante Virtuoso, cuts through the darkness. On board, there are 26 Filipino sailors. They are carrying thousands of tons of fuel, worth nearly $100 million. But close to midnight, something unusual appears on the radar. A small wooden boat races towards the tanker. On the boat, there are 7 men. Their faces are covered and they have rifles at hand. The captain and the crew have a bad feeling. They were told to expect armed guards at some point, but these men don't look right, and yet the ladder is lowered so they can enter. 6 men climbed aboard, while 1 stayed on the boat. Once these men are on deck, everything changes. They aim their weapons and shout commands. The crew is held captive under guard, and moments later, the tanker shakes and a sudden blast rips through the engine room. Flames erupt. Smoke begins to roll across the deck, and alarms start blaring. 1 sailor escapes and makes a desperate call into the night.
This is the Brillante Virtuoso. We are under attack. We're on fire. We have pirates on board. I repeat, pirates on board.
Hours pass and a US Navy ship and a helicopter respond, rescuing the crew. By the time the dawn breaks, the Brillante is just drifting and smoking, but the armed men, they're gone. They disappeared into the night. No hostages, no ransom demands, no exploitation. But the question remains, where did they go and how did it all happen so suddenly? Everyone was looking for these exact answers, and that's where this story begins.
Dark side.
When the smoke finally cleared up, 1 man was called in to uncover the truth. His name was Captain David Mockett. Mockett was a British Marine surveyor living in Aden. His job didn't look glamorous from the outside, but it was crucial. If a ship was damaged, he was called in to investigate. His report could decide whether insurance companies paid out millions or nothing at all. When Mockett boarded the Brillante Virtuoso, the damage shocked him. The air still smelled of burned fuel, steel plating was completely warped and blackened by flames. The crew was safe, but they told the story of armed men, gunfire, and sudden fire. But to Mockett, these details didn't add up. An accidental engine room fire is usually chaotic. It spreads unpredictably, leaving destruction everywhere. But in this case, the burn looked precise, almost as if it had been placed in that exact spot. A spot that would disable the ship without destroying it completely. Second, the attackers, usually Somali pirates, were ruthless, but they were predictable. They had a clear pattern. They stormed ships, captured the crew, and demanded ransom worth millions. Real Somali pirates never left without hostages or money. Yet on the Brillante, the armed men vanished quickly. They left behind a burning ship, but no demands. That was completely unheard of. Third was the boarding itself. Why would the captain lower the ladder for strangers in the middle of the night? Why did the intruders claim to be security guards? And why did the fire break out so quickly after they came aboard? As Mockett wrote in his early notes, questions piled up. Who were these men really? Why did they pretend to be a security team? Why damage the ship instead of holding it? And who stood to gain from this disaster? From the very start, Mockett's instincts told him the official story was wrong. This was no simple pirate attack. Something sinister was being hidden. Mockett didn't know it yet, but following these doubts would even place him in danger too. Did this unknown danger stop him from unraveling this conspiracy? Definitely not. But what he found out next wasn't just shocking, but completely insane. When Captain David Mockett studied the wreck of the Brillante Virtuoso, his suspicions only grew stronger. To Mockett, this felt completely staged, and soon other evidence began to point in the same direction. When it came to the fire, independent fire and explosive experts supported Mockett's view. The burn marks were consistent with an internal blast, not an accidental engine fire. In fact, the tanker was insured for an enormous sum under war risk insurance. This meant if pirates attacked the ship, the owner stood to receive tens of millions of dollars, but if it were just a normal mechanical failure, the owner would get nothing. And that's why at the center of this entire investigation was a Greek ship owner. His name was Mario Iliopoulos. Investigators and court documents suggested that Iliopoulos had huge debts and financial troubles. For Iliopoulos, the ship wasn't just a cargo, it was a liability. But if the ship became a victim of piracy, it became a lifeline. To Mockett, the picture became clear. This wasn't hijacking, it was a staged attack. A controlled explosion, terrified sailors as witnesses, and just enough damage to justify a massive payout. But there was a problem. If Mockett reported this as fraud, the entire plan would collapse. Exposing this would be very dangerous, and the people who stood behind it stood to lose everything, and very soon, that danger would catch up with him. Mockett documented everything: photos, reports, emails, and he raised concerns internally, quietly and carefully. Days after his inspection, David Mockett climbed into his car in Aden. He was driving through the city as he had done countless times before, but then, a massive explosion. A bomb hidden in his car tore through the entire street. Mockett died on the spot. To his family and friends, the timing was too suspicious to be a coincidence. He had just questioned the Brillante story and was about to send formal reports to London that would challenge the insurance claim. Now, he was gone. Authorities opened an investigation, but progress was slow. They believed that Mockett was killed because of what he discovered. His colleagues found out even more chilling information. His personal notes were stolen. Then, another figure connected to the case, lawyer Roger Stokes, also died under suspicious circumstances. To Mockett's family, the pattern was undeniable. He was murdered because he knew the truth. The hijacking of the Brillante Virtuoso was never about pirates. It was about fraud and millions of dollars, and the man who dared to speak up paid the ultimate price. But the question that must be lingering in your head is, what was the truth and what really happened? For months after the fire, the story of the Brillante Virtuoso was repeated in headlines. But behind the scenes, investigators and courts slowly uncovered a very different truth. The attack was staged. The 7 masked men who came aboard that night weren't Somali pirates. They were hired to play a role, to create fear, confusion, and just enough damage to trigger an insurance claim. But that's not all. The fire was deliberate. Independent experts later confirmed what David Mockett had suspected. The explosion and blaze in the engine room were not random. They had been set deliberately, in exactly the right place to disable the ship without sinking it. The motive was money. The only person to gain from this would be the owner. Court records pointed to Mario Eliopoulos. The Brillante was an old ship, expensive to operate, but insured for a fortune. A pirate attack would be the perfect way out. Years later, in a London courtroom, judges would rule that the Brillante hijacking was one of the biggest maritime frauds in history. A staged drama built on lies that cost a man his life. David Mockett had been right all along, and this incident had implications that affected the whole world. Every day, thousands of massive ships cross the oceans. They carry the fuel that powers our cars, the goods that fill our homes, and the materials that keep industries alive. But behind these ships lies a world most people never see. Ships are often registered in countries they have no real connection to, so owners can avoid strict laws. Many are controlled through shell companies that exist only on paper, hidden away in tax havens. And the money behind them, the insurance, loans, and profits is all tied up in billion-dollar deals handled in offices in London, New York, and Singapore. The hijacking of the Brillante Virtuoso showed how fragile this system really is. A ship owner drowning in debt managed to stage a fake pirate attack, set a fire, and trick nearly global insurers into paying out hundreds of millions of dollars. David Mockett, a man simply doing his job with honesty, was silenced forever. His death was a warning that in this industry, telling the truth can be as dangerous as facing pirates on the open sea. If one man could plan such a fraud and almost succeed, how many others had already slipped by unnoticed? So, what do you think? Was this just one man's desperate scheme for money, or does it prove that the sea is still the perfect place to commit the perfect crime? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.